Kia ora, good evening, and welcome to the latest episode of Critics and Cars Getting Home.
And tonight we're getting home from the premiere screening of Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, brought to you by the directors of Game Night, which you may know as one of our favorite movies.
From a couple of years ago. Now, that film had Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdam playing a married couple, and it had a whole cast of other marvellous people as well, and it was witty, and it was clever, and it twisted and turned, and it really exceeded expectations.
And did this exceed expectations?
No.
And you did not have expectations.
I had not really any expectations. I will come clean and say I don't play Dungeons & Dragons, but I don't think that means you can't make a good movie. I mean, I'd never been on the Jungle Cruise ride at Disneyland, and I thought Jungle Cruise was an absolute bundle of laughs. Now, that film starred Emily Blunt and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and what an amazing couple they made. Who was in this film, Doug?
Well, we have Chris Pine playing Jason Bateman if he fell into a plasticine well, and Michelle Rodriguez, notable comedian, bringing her light touch, as it were, to some kind of barbaric warrior.
Basically, Michelle Rodriguez playing the same character that she plays in all of the Fast movies. And she's good at that. And, you know, she does her own stunts and she's fine in the fight scenes. I just didn't care about any of it.
No. It's, look, I was hoping that with the Game Night directors on board, there would be a bit of meta aspect to it, and there's a couple moments with a little bit of cleverness, but fundamentally, Dungeons & Dragons is a strange franchise. I grew up playing it, and, you know, they managed to mess it up on both ends, because back in 2000, right before a little fantasy film called Lord of the Rings made fantasy cool again, Jeremy Irons and Marlon Wayans kept fantasy uncool with the original Dungeons and Dragons movies.
Did you see those? I didn't.
I didn't. Singular, I think, actually.
Right.
And now we've come out the other side with fantasy having been made cool with Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones.
And a lot of this looks like Lord of the Rings.
Oh my gosh, if I had $1 for every tracking shot across the verdant landscape of people on horseback in this.
And
or
elven cities and hobbit-like people.
Or wizards missing noses and stuff.
It's also a bit Harry Potter, but not in a good way.
Oh yeah, there's a bit of that. Yeah, and now I feel like we've been through the other side of that cycle, and so it's not fresh, it's not new.
I too was hoping for it to be meta. I mean, the Game Night didn't even plunder I mean, it was just terribly clever, terribly well written and witty. And this film, at very least, I thought, well, maybe I'm not laughing because I'm not getting the Easter eggs. And I understand that there are a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons Easter eggs in it, as you would expect. But there was nothing clever.
That's not quite true. You laughed. So there are. For my money, there's a couple good scenes. There is what we'll call the 5 question scene.
Sure.
That you laughed at.
Yes.
And that,
the graveyard scene.
Yes. And then there is one of the set pieces of Game Night is a single shot take.
Yes.
And there's a similar single shot take here of a pursuit involving a shapeshifter, which is great fun.
Yes.
And I did feel like a lot of the third act set piece, which often in these movies devolves into people
boring
shooting energy
scenes.
beams against each other. Really, the third act actually had, I mean, I was really surprised that given how bored I was during the first 2 acts largely.
Were you? Yeah. I was too.
It was just, and I feel like a lot of the cast was just at sea. Justice Smith was probably the best for me. He was the young wizard boy, and he was nothing beyond
care
fine.
About him much. I don't like that. I mean, I don't mean don't like. How awful of me. But Sophia Lillis, who plays the little shape-shifting creature, there's something just kind of stroppy about her. Like, I think the casting was terrible, except for Hugh Grant.
But even then, he's just doing the bloody
scenery,
thing.
And he's just playing Hugh Grant from The Gentleman, or Hugh Grant from flippin' Ruse de Guerre. Was he in Ruse de Guerre?
Yes, he was. Yes.
You know, so basically playing Hugh.
He's a ne'er-do-well. Can you believe it? Hugh Grant. He was so lovely in that 4 Weddings and the Funeral. My gosh.
He's really good at being the character that he is, but it's just the same Hugh Grant that we've always seen, and also just felt like, I don't know, it's hard to, I don't know, what I'm trying to do is praise him for elevating it, but also just kind of go, what are you even doing?
Yeah, it's not even worth talking anymore. We've been 5 minutes, and it's
a disappointment. I wonder how disappointing it'll be for the aficionados.
I will say I feel like there's not a lot. I mean, I don't even know how I would suggest improving it apart from the casting, and it just feels like an adventure that doesn't have anything more than sort of the arbitrary bias of Dungeons and Dragons adventures, which you go to point A and then you're told you have to go to point B, and then you're told you have to go to point C.
There's no drama. There's nothing to care about. I mean,
and then they try to, and that's actually the weakest part of it.
Who cares? There's no chemistry. No one has any chemistry. Yeah. I don't even mean romantic, but there's none of that either.
I do have a theory that in the Dungeons and Dragons game, the excitement of it, such as it is that you try to come up with an idea to something, and then you roll dice and execute it to see if it works. Mm-hmm. And that, if that is the appeal of the Dungeons and Dragons franchise, which you can say there's many other possible appeals, it's lost here because often they're doing things before you know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So there's none of the, I feel the satisfaction of having had something happen. It's just like,
Can I just ask also, narratively, sure. One thing that was a bit tiresome for me, and I wonder if this is how the game operates, is pretty much heaps of it's told in flashback, and there just seems to be a lot of narration. Oh, well, we're here because back in the day, blah, 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 and we get to see it. It's not just characters talking to other characters, but why? Or is that the nature of the beast?
That would be as a players, you're meeting these other non-player characters who the Dungeon Master gives voice to, and the Dungeon Master, or occasionally ringers, the Dungeon Master brings in.
Who was the Dungeon Master in this film?
Well, there wasn't one really. So the Dungeon Master is the filmmakers in that sense, but it's approximating, that like this would be a game with 4 players essentially, and then all the other characters being arbitrary. Yeah.
You've lost me.
No.
And I hope we haven't lost you. But I don't mind if the film loses you as a viewer. I mean, if you can...
It did get a lot of applause from a crowd that seemed like it might have been drawn from a Dungeons and Dragons mailing list for promos.
And that's fine. I'm
There's
not going to be
some people
sneery
dressed
about
up.
that. Because if it works for the people for whom it is made, then great.
Yeah.
But, I mean... I keep banging on about game night. I think all of the charm of game night was the casting. And when he said just before that Chris Pine is acting like Jason Bateman, he's literally got Jason Bateman's delivery of lines that could easily have been written for Jason Bateman. There's nothing wrong with that. If
Just
anything,
no twinkle in his eye or anything that kind of...
No, but it does feel like he's very Bateman-esque.
Yeah.
Which is fine, because I love Jason Bateman and he can do no wrong. But... he's not really making the film his own or anything like that.
So let's take game night out of the question.
Yeah,
if you compare it to Quantumania, the Ant-Man and the Wasp
I did
movie.
think of that because I'm in the unenviable task of having to assign stars. Now, I gave Quantumania 1.5. This didn't bore me as much as Quantumania, so I'm going to go 2 stars on this, which is hardly better, I know. But I did have a couple of... I had one chuckle, and one kind of, that's a good line, I'm going to write it down. Yeah.
There you go. Praising with faint dams, or damning with faint praise.
Just because you've made the line symmetrical doesn't make it true. That's a line in the film.
There are these little twinges of like, there was somebody being quite clever.
In colloquialisms is my favourite line.
And the fellow from Bridgerton who plays the paladin gets off a couple of good lines.
Is he from Bridgerton?
Yes.
So that dude, Jean Régis, someone or other, he's terrific. So I guess
and he fights a fat dragon, and the fat dragon's kind of fun.
Right, so I guess he's my Jonathan Majors from Quantumania, and so earns it another half star. Other than that, I'm so sorry, we've wasted so much of your time.
But on the other hand, we've wasted 124 minutes less than if you'd gone to see it, so...
Yeah!
As you were. Take care, and we'll see you next time.